If you had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here writing about how my marriage fell apart, I would have laughed in your face. Back then, I thought Lisa and I were solid, unbreakable even. But here I am, putting it all into words because, well, what else can I do? The cracks in our relationship weren't always visible. To the outside world, we seemed like the perfect couple. Even I didn't realize how deep things were going wrong until it was too late. Looking back, I can see it probably started about a year ago. Lisa and I had been married for 4 years. In the beginning, it was everything I had ever dreamed of: passion, laughter, and partnership. But as time went on, life fell into a routine. I became deeply focused on my work, trying to grow my small business into something that could secure our future. Lisa, who worked as a manicurist, started to feel like I wasn't around enough. At first, her comments were subtle. "Do you really have to work late tonight?" she would ask, or "Can't you put your phone down for just one evening?" But over time, her frustration grew. She started accusing me of putting my work before her and not caring about our relationship. I tried to explain myself. "I'm doing this for us," I told her, "for the family we'll have someday. I want kids, but we need to be ready first. I'm just trying to make sure we're secure." But it didn't seem to matter. Instead, she started throwing wild accusations at me, like me cheating on her. "You're always on your phone," she would say. "Who are you texting all the time?" Her distrust hurt. I showed her everything: my phone, my messages, my emails. "I'm not hiding anything," I told her. "I'm just trying to build something for us." But it wasn't enough. The accusations didn't stop, and the tension between us grew. I knew I needed to do something, so I decided to take a break from work and focus on us. I planned a short vacation to Miami Beach, a chance to reconnect and remind ourselves why we got married in the first place. For the first few days, it worked. We laughed, we relaxed, and for a brief moment, it felt like the old Lisa was back. Then we met Lily. She was a bubbly, outgoing girl who somehow struck up a conversation with Lisa while we were lounging on the beach. Before I knew it, she was tagging along with us everywhere we went. At first, I didn't mind. She seemed fun, and Lisa seemed to really like her. We found out that Lily was from our city, which felt like a weird twist of fate. By the end of the trip, the two of them were inseparable, exchanging numbers and making plans to hang out once we were back home. At the time, I thought it was a good thing. Lisa had been complaining about feeling lonely, and now she had a new friend. I even convinced myself that Lily might help Lisa feel more supported, which would take some of the pressure off me. After our vacation in Miami Beach, Lisa's friendship with Lily only grew stronger. If I had thought they would go their separate ways after the trip, I was sorely mistaken. Instead, they started spending more and more time together. Whenever I was at work, they'd be out shopping, at the spa, or just hanging out. At first, I didn't mind too much. Lisa seemed happier, more engaged with life, and I figured it was a good thing that she had someone to keep her company while I was busy. But then Lily's influence began to show its darker side. One night, I found out they had gone to a club together. This raised immediate red flags for me. Lily was single, carefree, and living like a college student. But Lisa, she was my wife. And our life wasn't supposed to be about wild nights out anymore. When she came home late that night, the smell of alcohol still on her breath, I didn't yell, but I didn't hold back either. "Lisa," I said, my tone firm, "you can't go to places like that. You're married now. It's not appropriate." She didn't argue. She just nodded and said she understood. I thought the issue was settled, but it wasn't. Over the next few weeks, things at home started to fall apart. Lisa's behavior changed in ways I couldn't ignore. She came home later and later, often after I had already gone to bed. The house, once a warm and welcoming place, began to feel abandoned. The dishes piled up in the sink. The floors went uncleaned, and I couldn't remember the last time she cooked us a meal. I found myself eating takeout or heading to my parents' house just to have a proper meal. I tried to keep my frustrations in check. After all, I was busy too, working late nights and putting in extra hours to ensure our business was thriving. But it was hard to shake the feeling that I was carrying the weight of our future while Lisa was out having fun. Eventually, the tension boiled over. One night, after another late return home, I confronted her. "Lisa, this has to stop. I'm working my ass off for us, and you're acting like you don't care. The partying, the late nights. It's not okay." Her response caught me off guard. "Don't blame me for this," she snapped. "You're the one who's never around. You don't pay attention to me. You don't care about what I need. And don't act so innocent. I know you're probably cheating on me too." The accusation stung, but what she said next was the real dagger to the heart. "You're a loser, Gregor. You can't even make enough money to give us the life we deserve. Let's face it, you're never going to." The words hit me like a truck. For a moment, I just stared at her, unable to comprehend what she'd said. She said it so casually, like it was a given, like it was justified because I wasn't meeting some imaginary standard. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't even ask for details. Instead, I grabbed a bag and packed a few essentials. "You'll get the divorce papers soon," I said coldly before walking out the door. I needed space, a place to clear my head and figure out my next move. That's when I thought of the campsite I used to visit as a kid. My dad and I used to spend weekends at a small wooden cabin deep in the woods. We'd fish, hunt, and pick mushrooms, living simply and enjoying the quiet of nature. I hadn't been there in years, but it felt like the only place that could help me now. Before heading out, I stopped by my parents' house and asked my dad if he wanted to join me. Without hesitation, he said, "Let's go," grabbing his gear. I handed over my business responsibilities to a trusted colleague and retreated to the wilderness. The fresh air, the stillness of the forest, and the simplicity of life out there worked wonders. I spent my days fishing with my dad, sitting by the campfire and letting the peace of the woods wash over me. Slowly, I felt the weight on my chest begin to lift. When I returned home, I was in a better place emotionally, ready to face whatever came next. To my surprise, Lisa was waiting for me at the door. The moment she saw me, she threw herself into my arms, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Gregor," she sobbed. "I don't know what I was thinking. Please forgive me." Her apology seemed genuine, and for a moment, I let myself believe it. I hugged her back, murmuring, "I'm sorry too." We spent the evening talking, apologizing, and trying to repair what had been broken. For a while, it seemed like things were getting better. We were more affectionate, more attentive to each other, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like our marriage might survive. But after it seemed like Lisa and I had turned a corner, I allowed myself to relax. I thought the worst was behind us. However, I couldn't have been more wrong. Things were about to spiral further out of control, and looking back, I should have seen the signs. What I thought was a new beginning was really just a calm before the storm. The shift happened when my company hit a rough patch. We had been on the brink of securing major financial backing, but delays and approvals meant everything was frozen overnight. My income dropped to zero. It wasn't catastrophic. I had savings and knew this was temporary, but it still stung. I didn't tell Lisa all the details. Maybe I should have, but I didn't want her to worry. I figured I could handle the situation on my own. Besides, I thought she trusted me to fix it. But instead of standing by me, Lisa seemed to take my temporary setback as an excuse to lose her mind. She began acting like she was the boss of the household, making every decision without consulting me. It wasn't just at home either. She took every opportunity to badmouth me to her friends, colleagues, and even family, painting me as some kind of failure who couldn't provide for his wife. "You know, Gregor," she said once, laughing at a family gathering, "he's always working hard, but somehow never getting ahead." I let it slide at first, thinking it was just a joke, but it kept happening. And it wasn't just words. She started coming home late again, always with Rebecca, refusing to tell me where they had been or what they were doing. When I asked, She'd brush me off with rude, dismissive answers. One night, after another late return, I tried to have a serious conversation with her. "Lisa," I said, keeping my voice calm, "what's going on with you? You're never home. You're constantly out with Rebecca, and when I try to talk to you, you shut me down." Her response left me stunned. "You think I owe you an explanation?" she snapped. "You don't get to tell me what to do, Gregor. Not anymore." She stormed off, packing a bag while I tried to process what was happening. Within minutes, Rebecca was outside, honking her car horn like some kind of getaway driver. Lisa didn't even look back as she walked out the door. I sat there for a long time, my mind racing, but something inside me snapped. Enough was enough. If Lisa thought she could treat me like this, I was going to find out exactly what she and Rebecca were up to. I grabbed my keys and followed them. The drive wasn't long, but every minute felt like an eternity. I kept my distance, careful not to let them notice me. They eventually pulled up to a house. I didn't recognize the area, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. I parked down the street and watched as two men came out to greet Lisa and Rebecca. They greeted the men with hugs and kisses. My stomach dropped. They all went inside, laughing and carrying on as if they didn't have a care in the world. My chest burned with anger and betrayal, but I didn't move. I knew I needed proof if I wanted any hope of a clean break in court. I crept around to the backyard, careful to stay hidden. The windows were large, and the curtains weren't drawn. From where I stood, I had a clear view of the bedroom. What I saw made my blood boil. Lisa and Rebecca were tangled up with the two men, their behavior leaving no room for doubt. I wanted to burst in there, drag her out of that bed, and make her face what she'd done, but I forced myself to stay calm. I pulled out my phone and recorded everything. The footage was more than enough. Once I had what I needed, I left. My hands were shaking as I drove home, the reality of what I had just witnessed sinking in. But instead of wallowing in anger, I decided to act. I went home, grabbed every piece of Lisa's clothing, her shoes, her makeup, anything that belonged to her, and packed it all into boxes. I didn't want a single trace of her left in my house. By morning, I had arranged for the boxes to be sent to her parents' house. I also called a locksmith and had the locks changed. Legally, I had every right to do it. The house was in my mother's name, not ours. Lisa didn't return that night, or even the next morning. When she finally came back and found herself locked out, her reaction was exactly what I expected, and more. At first, she screamed and banged on the door, demanding I let her in. When that didn't work, she started hurling every insult imaginable through the closed windows, calling me a failure, a coward, a pathetic excuse for a man. I didn't respond. The more she raged, the more her true colors came out. She threatened to take me for everything in the divorce, claiming she'd make me regret ever crossing her. But what Lisa didn't know was that I had planned for this moment long before it arrived. Everything I owned, the house, the car, even my business, was registered in my mother's name. On paper, I didn't have much to my name at all, which meant Lisa wouldn't have much to take from me. As her shouting grew louder, she began circling the house, knocking on windows, trying to find a way in. I knew this was going to escalate, so I did what any rational person would do. I called the cops. When the police arrived, I watched from inside as they confronted her. She started with the same angry tirade she'd aimed at me, but it didn't get her anywhere. They escorted her to the station, and just like that, the house was quiet again. It felt like a small victory, but it was only the beginning. While Lisa was at the station cooling off, I decided to visit her parents. I'd always gotten along well with them, and I figured it was better to explain the situation myself before Lisa had the chance to twist the story. When I told them everything, her behavior, the neglect, the late nights, and what I had discovered at Rebecca's house, they were devastated. I could see the disappointment in their eyes as they processed what their daughter had done. "We don't condone what she did," her father said finally, "but she's still our daughter, Gregor. This is between the two of you." I thanked them for listening and left, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. They were good people, but I couldn't expect them to take my side completely afterward. I stopped by my own parents' house. I needed to talk to someone who would understand without judgment, and they did. Sharing the whole story with them felt like lifting a weight off my chest. The next step was meeting with the lawyer I had already contacted. I explained everything, from Lisa's behavior to the evidence I'd gathered. The lawyer, a sharp and confident woman named Angela, assured me that we had a strong case. "This isn't going to be easy," she warned, "but with what you've shown me, we'll make sure she doesn't walk away with more than she deserves." The trial was as draining as I expected. Lisa's lawyer tried to paint her as the victim of a neglectful husband, but Angela countered every argument with cold, hard facts. The photos and videos I'd taken were devastating to Lisa's case, and her behavior at the house, along with the police report, didn't help her either. When the verdict came down, it was clear who had won. Lisa was awarded a small sum of money, barely a fraction of what she had expected. She had hoped for the house, the car, and the business to stay in my family's name. Custody of any shared assets was practically non-existent. Lisa didn't take this well. As soon as the ruling was announced, she exploded in anger, yelling at me, the judge, and everyone around her. Security had to escort her out of the courtroom, leaving me with a strange mix of triumph and sadness. Amidst all the chaos, there was a small ray of hope. The financing my company had been waiting for was finally approved after months of uncertainty. My hard work was beginning to pay off. Whenever I wasn't dealing with the divorce, I threw myself into my business, and it started to flourish. Soon, the company was thriving, and I had achieved the goal I had worked so hard for. But the person I had started this journey for, the person I thought I was building a future with, wasn't by my side. I thought about that a lot in those days. The 4 years I had spent with Lisa seemed wasted, yet they taught me valuable lessons that I couldn't ignore. News of my success spread fast, and it wasn't long before I began receiving attention I hadn't asked for. It felt strange and unpleasant when Lisa, the woman who had betrayed me, tarnished my name, and tried to take everything I had worked for, started showing up with apologies. She called, texted, and even showed up uninvited, begging for my forgiveness. At first, I ignored her. Then I blocked her number. But she wasn't the type to give up easily. Lisa began following me in public, bumping into me at stores or cafes. She'd beg and make excuses. "It was a mistake, Gregor," she'd say. I wasn't in my right mind. Rebecca pushed me into all of it. "Please, just give me one more chance." What kind of chance was she hoping for? A chance to destroy me again? I couldn't understand how someone could do what she did and then expect to be forgiven. Her persistence might have almost been laughable if it weren't so draining. Then one night, she crossed the line. I went outside to grab something from my car and found it vandalized. In bright red spray paint, Lisa had written insults and obscenities all over it. I stood there, staring at the damage, my anger rising. I immediately called my insurance company and documented everything, but deep down, I knew exactly who had done it. This wasn't just an act of desperation. IT was a tantrum. That was the moment I decided I had enough. If Lisa wanted chaos, I'd give her chaos, but on my terms. Lisa's best friend, Rebecca, had always been just like her. Manipulative, self-centered, and shallow. They were two sides of the same coin. I figured that if Lisa could betray me so easily, Rebecca wouldn't hesitate to do the same if the opportunity arose. So, I sent Rebecca a message. It was casual and polite. I asked her to meet me for dinner, but I didn't mention Lisa at all. I just said I wanted to catch up and talk now that everything had settled. To my surprise, she agreed without hesitation. That evening, I played the perfect gentleman. I let Rebecca order whatever she wanted. Fancy appetizers, a main course, dessert, and plenty of wine. By the time the bottle was empty, she was laughing and leaning toward me like we were old friends. I told her what she wanted to hear. "You know," I said, swirling the last bit of my drink, Even when Lisa and I were married, I always admired you. I thought things were solid between us, so I never acted on it. Guess I was wrong about her all along." Rebecca's face lit up, her cheeks flushing, either from the wine or the flattery. "Well, I always thought you deserved better," she said, her voice dropping into something more secretive. "Lisa, she wasn't always great to you, Gregor." "Oh, I know," I replied, shaking my head sadly. "But let's not talk about her tonight." By the end of the evening, Rebecca was fully on my side. When I offered to give her a ride home, she eagerly accepted. But instead of just dropping her off, one thing led to another, and we ended up inside her house, and then in her bed. As Rebecca drifted off to sleep, I quietly got dressed. Before I left, I took a quick selfie of us in bed, her face peaceful and unaware. Using Rebecca's phone, I sent the photo to Lisa with a simple line: "Look what your best friend's up to now." I left the house and parked a block away, waiting to see what would happen. It didn't take long. About 10 minutes later, a taxi screeched to a halt in front of Rebecca's house, and Lisa rushed out like a hurricane. I couldn't hear the shouting from where I was, but the wild gestures and angry pacing were enough to tell me things were escalating fast. Satisfied, I called the police, pretending to be a concerned neighbor. "There's some kind of fight going on at that house," I said. "You might want to send someone before it gets out of hand." By the time the police arrived, the damage had already been done. From what I heard later, they had each given the other bloody noses by the time the officers separated them. That night was the last time I had to deal with either of them. A week later, I packed up and moved to another city. I found a quiet place where no one knew my story, and I started over. The drama, the betrayal, the heartbreak. It was all behind me. While I wouldn't say I was proud of how I handled things, I couldn't deny the satisfaction of knowing that Lisa and Rebecca got exactly what they deserved. Sometimes, revenge isn't about getting even. It's about closing a chapter and moving forward. And that's exactly what I did.